The sound of my father's voice still burns like acid in my memory. He slammed his hand on the table and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You'll get nothing, Patricia. You don't deserve a single inch of this land." I remember the way everyone stared. Their silence felt heavier than the slap that followed. It wasn't the pain that stung. It was the certainty in his eyes, as if I had been erased from his bloodline long ago. And yet, months later, at the will reading, when the lawyer looked him straight in the eye and said, "Sir, you have no idea who actually owns Lakewood," the room went completely still, and for the first time in my life, my father didn't have a word to say. The clock on the wall ticked with merciless precision, slicing through the heavy silence that filled the oak-paneled room. The air smelled faintly of polish and dust, like old secrets waiting to surface. My father sat at the head of the long table, tie knotted too tight, pride swelling in every breath he took. Around him, relatives leaned forward, whispering, pretending to mourn while already calculating their shares. To them, this wasn't grief, it was business. I sat at the far end, quiet, my fingers locked together beneath the table. I could feel the weight of being the one who'd walked away, the daughter no one expected to matter. McAdams, the family lawyer, began reading, his voice even and restrained. As stated in the testament of Richard Owens, my father cut him off, sharp and sure. "We don't need the theatrics. My father left everything to me." McAdams looked up, his eyes calm but cutting. "Are you certain you understand who actually owns Lakewood, Mr. Owens?" The room froze. Even the clock seemed to hesitate. My father laughed, brittle and loud. "Don't be ridiculous. I've lived there 40 years. McAdams closed the file gently. 12 years ago, Mr. Owens, your father transferred Lakewood's ownership to your daughter, Patricia Owens. The silence that followed was absolute. My father's face drained of color, and as he slammed his hand against the table, I felt it, the old balance of power finally breaking. After the will reading, I drove north for hours, back to the place I once promised myself I'd never return to. The roads curved through endless miles of autumn, carpeted in fading gold. Vermont's air carried the scent of wet wood and chimney smoke, as if the whole countryside was quietly burning down its memories. When the familiar outline of Lakewood appeared on the horizon, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. The farmhouse stood in the middle of an empty field, its porch half collapsed, the fence leaning, the windows fractured like veins. Faint letters still clung to the weathered sign out front. Lakewood, Owens since 1936. A family once built on pride, now sinking under its own decay. I pushed open the front door. Cold air hit me in the chest. Dust floated through the stillness like ash. On the living room table sat a coffee cup with a faded lipstick stain, the same shade my mother used to wear before she died. The grandfather clock in the corner, once the heart of this house, lay silent, its pendulum broken. I pulled open an old drawer and froze as a stack of papers slid to the floor. My name printed across the top. Vermont Agricultural Credit, Loan Agreement, Owens Property. The signature beneath it, shaky, uneven, wasn't mine. My chest tightened. My father had borrowed money against the land he no longer owned, using my name as collateral. I took photos and sent them to McAdams. Minutes later, his reply came through. "Keep everything. Don't confront him. You're about to understand why your grandfather did what he did." I stood in the hallway, fingertips brushing the rough wood where my grandfather had once carved the words, "Truth is the last asset you can't lose." He must have known. He must have seen this coming. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry. The silence in that house was punishment enough. The next morning, McAdams called me back to his office. A thick leather folder sat on his desk, its edges darkened by time. He pushed it toward me with quiet care. "Your grandfather left this in my possession. He told me to open it only when you were strong enough to hear the truth." Inside was the original deed of transfer, Lakewood, signed and notarized 12 years ago, the same year I left Vermont for Seattle. Beneath it lay a handwritten letter. The ink faded but steady. "I know my son has lost more than money. He's lost his sense of honor. I can't save him, but I can save the name. Patricia, if you're reading this, it means you've found the courage to protect it. My throat burned as I looked up at McAdams. He continued gently. Your father used Lakewood as collateral 3 times. The debt stands at $700,000. If the bank uncovers the fraud, he could face prosecution. But your grandfather anticipated this. He moved the property into a living trust, under your name. No one, not even your father, can touch it now. I asked, barely above a whisper. Why me? Because he said you never saw land as a possession, McAdams replied, but as a promise. When I stepped outside, the first snow of the season had begun to fall. Soft, deliberate, like a cleansing. Streetlights glowed faintly against the white, and the world felt suspended between guilt and grace. Driving back toward Lakewood, I realized my grandfather hadn't been protecting the property at all. He'd been protecting the truth. And now, that truth was in my hands, along with the power to decide what came next. Snow fell thick and heavy the afternoon I returned to Lakewood. The lake had frozen over. The porch sagged under the weight of winter, and the whole house looked like an old man who'd finally given up trying to stand straight. Inside, the air was stale with dust and something metallic, the scent of neglect. In my father's study, the one he used to boast was the command center of the Owens legacy. I found chaos. Stacks of unpaid bills, envelopes stamped final notice, and folders thick with bank correspondence cluttered the desk. Several bore my name. A thick envelope sat buried in the drawer, marked Property Transfer Agreement, Caleb Owens. My chest tightened as I unfolded it. It was a contract transferring the northern acres of Lakewood to my half-brother, Caleb. My name appeared beneath his, the section labeled Consenting Party, signed in a hand that wasn't mine. He had forged my consent. Again. I snapped photos and sent them to McAdams. Within minutes, he called, his tone sharp. If he finalizes that sale, he's not just losing land, he's committing fraud. I said quietly, almost to myself. He's not afraid of the law, McAdams. He's afraid of losing his image. As I kept sorting through the papers, my hand brushed against a photo frame buried under receipts. It was my grandfather, Richard Owens, with his arm around me at 15, both of us standing by the old fence line. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "This house belongs to whoever keeps its honor." The light from the desk lamp flickered across the photo, casting a small golden glow over the wreckage on the desk, like dignity still trying to survive in the ruins. I heard the front door slam. Heavy footsteps crossed the hallway. My father appeared in the doorway, snow on his shoulders, anger blazing in his face. "What are you doing in my office?" I didn't look up, cleaning up the mess. He strode over and snatched the papers from my hands. "You have no right." I faced him. "I have every right. The name on those papers is mine." He froze, eyes narrowing, then gave a hollow laugh. "So you think you're the owner now? You left. You forfeited everything when you walked out on this family. You destroyed it long before I left," I said quietly. "I'm just seeing the damage now." His hand came fast, a sharp, stinging blow across my face. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. For a moment, the room stood still. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. "If you still care about Lakewood," I said calmly, "then start by telling the truth." He breathed hard, chest heaving. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said, "just more honest." He turned, slammed the door so hard the photo on the wall trembled. I stood alone in the half-light, the echo of the slap fading into the wind outside. Looking around the ruined office, I whispered to the empty room, "This isn't a home anymore, just a hollow shell stuffed with debt and pride." 2 days later, my father called a family meeting. The dining hall smelled of stale wood and bitterness. The chandelier above flickered weakly, throwing light across a long table draped in a wrinkled white cloth. In the center sat a vase of wilted flowers, like an unspoken warning that nothing alive could last long here. Faces I hadn't seen in years filled the seats, cousins, uncles, aunts, the same people who once whispered that I'd abandoned my bloodline. My father sat at the head, jaw locked, voice sharp as a blade. "We're ending this chaos today," he said. She'll sign the papers and return Lakewood to the family. I sat straight-backed, silent. McAdams arrived a moment later and took the seat beside me. He placed a leather folder on the table and opened it deliberately. When he began reading aloud, the room shifted. Any attempt to coerce, threaten, or pressure Patricia Owens into relinquishing her rights will nullify the remainder of the inheritance. The murmurs erupted instantly. My father shot to his feet, face flushed. "That's a threat," he barked. McAdams' voice was steady, measured. "It's a quotation, sir, from Richard Owen's own hand." The table fell quiet again. I could feel their eyes on me, some curious, others venomous. My father pointed a shaking finger. "You're taking this house from your own father." My voice was low but clear. "You took it from yourself the day you turned it into collateral." Caleb suddenly stood, his voice cracking. "You've always thought you were better than us. You don't understand what he's done to keep this place." I turned to him, softer than before. "Keeping land by drowning it in debt isn't loyalty, Caleb, and calling deceit devotion doesn't make it love." No one spoke. The silence pressed against the walls. Even the clock seemed to hesitate before ticking again. My father slammed his palm on the table, trying to reclaim control. "Enough! I'm the head of this family. My word stands." McAdams moved forward, his tone like polished steel. "Not anymore. Mr. Owens, the law stands now." For a long moment, no one breathed. Then my aunt, quiet and worn, whispered, "Maybe it's time to stop." Harold. I watched him, the man who'd never bowed to anyone, falter for the first time. His eyes flicked toward me, not with anger this time, but fear. Fear of losing everything he thought defined him. He pushed back his chair and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the chandelier trembled. Outside, the wind howled through the old cracks in the windows, a mournful sound that filled the silence he left behind. I gathered the papers, sliding them back into McAdams' folder. "Now I understand," I said quietly. "Grandfather didn't just leave me the land. He left me a test." McAdams nodded slowly. "Halfway through?" "Patricia. The rest will be harder. You'll have to choose between being right and being at peace." I looked toward the darkened doorway where my father had stood. "Then I'll choose both." The cabin where my grandmother once lived sat deep among the maple trees, half buried under snow. The door groaned when I pushed it open, releasing a draft of cold, dusty air. Inside, everything was frozen in time. A chipped mug, a folded blanket, the faint smell of tobacco that still lingered. I opened a cabinet, and a small wooden box fell to the floor. Inside were letters tied with string and a worn leather journal. My grandfather's handwriting trembled across the first page. "Harold grows prouder by the day. He's forgotten that honor isn't something you can borrow. When I'm gone, this land might lose its soul with him." Between the pages, I found an envelope addressed to me. "Patricia, if you're reading this, your father still hasn't learned the truth. Lakewood isn't property. It's witness. I gave it to you not because you needed it, but because you understood it. Stand firm. Honor can't be divided." The wind shook the window as I turned the last page. A notarized deed fell out, signed 12 years ago, proof my grandfather had foreseen everything. Another envelope lay hidden beneath, labeled Harold, never sent. "If she still has the kindness I believed in, thank her. She'll save you from yourself." Back at Lakewood, dusk settled over the fields. My father stood on the porch, snow clinging to his coat. I handed him the journal. He flipped through it, scoffing. "Just an old man's game." "No," I said quietly. "It was his way of protecting you." He dropped the journal and crushed it beneath his heel. I picked it up and met his eyes. "He believed you could change. He just prepared for the day you wouldn't." When I turned to leave, his voice followed me. "Give up the land, and I'll erase the debts. Refuse, and you'll ruin this family." I didn't look back. "You ruined it long ago. I'm just keeping it from sinking further." That night, the storm came. Wind howled over the lake, snow striking the windows like fists. I sat by the fire, listening, until the phone rang. My father's voice rasped through the line. "Come to the house, one last time." Crossing the yard, snow whipped against my face. Inside, The air smelled of smoke and surrender. My father sat near the fireplace, pen trembling in his hand. If I sign this, I lose everything. If you don't, I said, you'll lose what's left of your self-respect. He stared at the paper, eyes hollow. I don't know who I am without Lakewood, and I don't know who I am if I keep fearing you. After a long silence, he signed. The ink bled as his hand shook. Outside, the wind roared, nature's own absolution. He looked up, voice cracking. You think you've won. I don't want to win, I said. I just want the truth to survive us both. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time, he looked human, not powerful, just a man stripped bare. I closed the grate over the dying fire. When the snow melts, I'll leave. Lakewood won't haunt you anymore. By morning, McAdams called. The bank had accepted his admission. My father had saved himself from prison, but lost everything else. Outside, snow still fell, soft and steady. For the first time in years, Lakewood felt quiet, like it had finally forgiven us both. When the storm lifted, Vermont was wrapped in white. The air smelled of cold wood and smoke as I carried the signed document to McAdams' office. He read each line slowly, then looked up. This doesn't just end his control. It transfers every debt back to him. I breathed out, not with joy, but with closure. I never wanted to ruin him, I said. I just needed him to stop. The door opened. Caleb stepped in, eyes rimmed red, holding an envelope. You should see this. Inside was my father's last loan agreement, my name forged, and beneath it, Caleb's signature. He made me sign for you, he whispered. I was too afraid to refuse. Then help fix it, I said. McAdams promised the bank would reconsider if Caleb cooperated. He nodded, tears streaking his face. He almost sold the northern land. You came back just in time. I drove to Lakewood that afternoon. My father sat on the porch, staring at the frozen lake. I set the paper beside him. It's over. You're free, but Lakewood is mine now. He sighed. You think you saved the family name? No, I said. I saved myself. He looked away. Maybe that's the same thing. Weeks later, the documents were complete. Lakewood was mine, not as a prize, but as a duty. I didn't close it off. I opened it wider. Following my grandfather's plans, I began transforming the land into the Owens Community Agricultural Center, a place where young people could learn how to work the soil and preserve what generations had nearly lost. Workers arrived first, then students, then volunteers carrying shovels and hope. The old barns were torn down, the earth turned over. For the first time in years, Lakewood felt alive again. One afternoon, while cleaning my grandfather's cabinet, a photograph slipped out. He and I standing near the lake, planting a small flag. On the back, in his fading script, if you choose kindness over revenge, this family still has hope. I sat on the floor, tears falling, not from sadness, but from the feeling of being seen. Even now, I chose Grandpa. I whispered. Meanwhile, my father sold his old truck, paid off part of his debt, and moved to a small cabin near the lake. When I visited, he sat by the window, a cup of tea trembling in his hand. You shouldn't have come, he said. I came to thank you for signing. He gave a weary smile. I didn't sign because I wanted to. I signed because I lost. No, I told him. You signed because you finally told the truth. He looked away, voice low. Then maybe that's enough. Spring arrived early that year, and Lakewood felt reborn. The Owens Community Agricultural Center opened under a clear sky, the fields alive with laughter and color. Neighbors gathered on the grass, children chasing each other between the rows, flags rippling in the wind. I stood on a small wooden stage, the microphone humming softly as the breeze brushed my face. My voice carried across the field. Lakewood was once a place where honor was lost. Today, it's where it begins again. My grandfather used to say, land is just land until people treat it with conscience. I think the same is true for us. Applause spread through the crowd, but I wasn't listening. My eyes searched the last row of folding chairs, and there he was. My father sat quietly, his brown coat buttoned to the neck, hair more silver than I remembered. Beside him sat Caleb. For a long moment, our eyes met. He didn't stand or wave. He simply placed a trembling hand over his chest, the same heart that once felt made of stone, and smiled. I nodded back. For the first time, I felt seen. Not for what I'd won, but for what I'd rebuilt. After the ceremony, I walked along the edge of the lake. The water mirrored the pale spring sky, soft and endless. A breeze stirred the reeds, and for an instant, I could almost hear my grandfather's voice. You kept what mattered most, Patricia. You didn't let hate become your inheritance. I smiled, whispering into the wind. I'm home now.